Hello, my name is Michaela. I am a 5th grade teacher in Wisconsin, and today I'm going to tell you the entire story of how I found a new job. I'm going to say right off the bat, I am still a teacher. I am still going to be a 5th grade teacher, but I'm going to tell you all the things that I went through, all the things that you need to know if you are going through the same process about how I found a new job at a new school. This means that I'm going to go through my reasons for why I did this, the process that I went through in telling my school about it, writing a resume, applying for jobs, interviewing, and then obviously accepting a position. I'm also going to say right away that this is extremely bittersweet. It's not something that I'm like, oh, I didn't think I would get emotional. I'm not like super happy to be leaving the school that I am still currently at, but it's definitely something I'm also excited about for the future, and I think it's the best decision for me. Let's just hop right in with why I'm doing this in the first place. Why did I start looking for jobs? Because like I just said, it's not something that I'm super happy about. I don't want to be leaving, but I do have my reasons, and they are good reasons for me. I'm gonna say right away as well that this has nothing to do with the kids. So if any of my kids are watching this, whether they're previous students or future students, this has nothing to do with you. And you are the main reason that I am really sad about leaving, and I do not want to leave you. I have to put that out there. So like I said, this isn't something that I was planning on doing, and actually a couple months before school ended, my stepdad asked me what was my plan to make more money as a teacher. And that was a weird conversation because I'm like, I don't think you can really negotiate in the same way that you do in like a corporate job or like a non-teacher job. That started the conversation of me possibly looking for new jobs. That conversation led into other reasons for why I might start looking. And one of the main reasons is that I live over half an hour from the current school that I work at. So I was spending over an hour every day, and especially if I wanted to go to like an event on the weekend or go to something that a kid invited me to, it just took a lot of driving and a lot of time, and especially as gas prices are going up, a lot of money. I had always known in the back of my head that that might not be the school that I will be at forever because of the drive, and it wasn't in my hometown, and I did not want to move there. And so I always knew that I would probably try to find a different school in the future. I just didn't really know the timeline of that or when. This brings me to the first part of my process, which was making a list of everything that I want in a school. Now that I had been a teacher for a couple of years, I had more understanding of the position. I knew my preferences and the things that were important to me, and the things that I really didn't like. So I sat down and I made a list of my magic wand situation. Like if I had to be extremely selfish in what I want in a job, I was writing it down. I'm gonna tell you right now what some of those things were. I thought that I had a lot, but then when I started writing them down, I was like, oh, I actually don't have that many. The first thing on my list, and the most important, because this is the reason that I was starting to look for jobs in the first place, was the drive time. I was very specific and strict with the time that I wanted to drive every day, and so I said no more than a 20-minute drive, preferably 15 or less. But like if it went up to 20, I was like, okay, I might apply for it. But that was the one thing that was like my most important. The other thing was pay. It was very difficult for me to come up with a number that I wanted to make as a teacher. I just didn't really have the knowledge of what is a reasonable salary to expect or ask for or look for. I tried looking online to see, average teacher salaries, but I wasn't sure if I put a bigger amount, like would that even be possible? And I don't want to turn down a job because of that number, like if it's not reasonable. So I just put down what I thought would be a reasonable number, $50,000 a year. However, I did think that $50,000 was like really pushing it. Like in my head, that would be impossible. It was like, I have to at least make what I'm gonna make next year at my current school. If it's more than that, that's amazing. But like 50,000 in my head was like, wow, that would be insane. The other things I had on my list were Bridges math curriculum. I loved Bridges this past year, and it's something that I was really excited to keep doing. I also had made a ton of resources for Bridges. Like I have every single lesson for the units and Number Corner written out in a Google Doc, shortened to one page with all the resources listed that you need for each lesson, like on that page. And I'm really proud of it. If you use Bridges and you want it, like let me know. I can get you a copy. But that was something I did not want all of my work to go to waste. And also, I just like the curriculum. I did really want whatever school I go to be one-to-one with Chromebooks for students. I wanted every student to be able to have a Chromebook. I would love if the school provided us with a teacher MacBook, because that's what my current school gave us. We get a MacBook Air and it's so nice. And I know a lot of schools use Chromebooks for teachers. And so that wasn't, again, a deal breaker, but it is on my list as something that would be really nice. Relaxed dress code. It says, let me wear jeans. The current school I'm at is amazing with dress code. Like, I honestly don't even know if we have one. We probably do. But it is like so relaxed. You can pretty much wear whatever you want every day. And I would have loved to be at a school that does that. I kept saying to my friends, like, I will tell them that I will not accept this job unless you let everyone wear jeans and I will be some hero in that school. But obviously, if I got a job that seemed good and they had a more professional dress code, obviously, if I felt it was right, I would take that job. But it is on my list as magic wand. This is what I want. Obviously, good insurance and benefits. And then the last thing on my list was a good team. Like, I want a team who's encouraging and positive, who wants to collaborate, but can also work on their own. Like, we don't all have to be on exactly the same page at all times, but we do want to work together and share things with each other. An organized team, a super flexible team, like a funny team. And I put on there young, though the age doesn't matter as long as the personality comes with it. I was really wanting a team that like meshed with me. So that was my first thing I did in my process. I sat down, I made a list of all the things that I ideally wanted, and then from that list, I made my deal breakers, which mainly came down to two things. One, the drive time needed to be within 15 to 20 minutes from my home, and two, I made my limit for salary $44,000. So if I didn't make at least what I'm going to make next year at my current school, then that was a deal breaker. Everything else on that list was just extra. The other thing in my process is that I had to tell my school that I was looking for jobs. And I was very nervous about this because I had never done this before. And I was like, how do you get a letter of recommendation from your principal without them being like, you're trying to leave us? And so that was very scary for me, but I got some good advice from my teammates and they were like, you just ask, like they're used to it. They know. And so I just asked if I could meet with her in person, and she came up to talk to me, and I was very positive about the school and everything they've done for me, and I was like, this has nothing to do with me feeling negatively about this. I do not want to leave, and then I said my main reason, which is the drive, and she was super understanding, and she was actually like gave me so much advice and support in how to go about looking for a job. She gave me advice on like who else to be asking for letters of recommendation from so that I have a good repertoire of letters. And so yeah, she was just very helpful. And so then from there, I picked who else I was going to ask letters of recommendation from. I ended up asking for letters from my principal, from a fellow grade level teacher who was also my mentor when I was a first year teacher, our math specialist, our school counselor, and then my cooperating teacher from when I student taught. And so that gave me a good rounded out pool of letters that show that I am a good teacher from a lot of different lenses in the school. The next step in my process was updating my resume. The last resume that I made was back when I applied for the 4th grade long-term substitute position at my current school. I applied for this when I was student teaching, and so that was the last time I made a resume, which means that none of my actual teaching experience was on my resume. I'm going to show you a copy of it because I want you to just see like generally what it looks like. I'm not going to show you all the details on it. I will just talk through what's on it. But I want you to see it because I do believe that what I did with the design of this helped. My previous resume was just black and white, and it just was like lines of text, and it did look very professional. And I got the template from my mom, who works in like the corporate setting, and so I definitely think that that made sense for where I was at the time. I was talking with one of my friends who does graphic design, and she's like, do you want me to update your resume and like design it? And I was like, yeah, that'd be awesome. And she did such an amazing job. So as you can see, it has color on the side. She added a picture, and then it has these like little graphics. It's like really nice. It's very appealing to the eye. And so I definitely think that adding in the color, adding in a picture, having like it look visually appealing makes it stand out. I don't know if that actually made me stand out, and because nobody at the school told me, wow, we saw your resume and we were drawn to it. But I personally believe that if you can make it stand out in some way with color or a specific kind of design or your picture on it, I think that helps. I'm just gonna go through the basic parts that I have on here. I think sometimes people feel like they don't have the experience they need, but I think that you can reword any prior experience you have in the past that maybe isn't directly related to the job you're applying for, but you can like reword it. You can make anything applicable to anything, in my opinion. So I have my basic information on here. Obviously, we all know basic information for resumes. I do have my education on here. I have my certifications on here. I have this little summary about myself, which I put in a bunch of keywords that I feel like describe me. So it says proven, compassionate, and encouraging leader, dedicated to helping students, parents, and schools reach their unique potential, exceptional ability to organize ideas, and efficiently implement and execute strategies and tasks. This is pretty much the same summary of myself that I had on my non-teaching related resume. I just changed a couple of the words to be applicable to students, parents, and schools. But the reason that I have this is because I know myself really well. I know the qualities I would use to describe myself and who I am, and I want to portray that to whoever is reading my resume right away in like one spot. I also put some of my community volunteer experience on here that isn't directly related to teaching. With my church that I'm a part of, I am a sort of life coach where I help take people through a program that helps them get their life in control and helps them have a better life. And that's basically teaching and guiding people through a curriculum of sorts. So I wanted to put that on there as applicable experience. So if you have anything in your life, even if it wasn't like an official position or it was something that you did in your off time, add that to your resume. Again, you can make anything applicable to anything. Think, how does this relate to anything that you would do as a teacher, and like put that on there. Then I obviously have my work experience on there, so I have all of my teaching experience right at the top, and then I listed just some basic things that I did. I did make sure to include all of the curriculum or resources that I have experience with by name, so like Lucy Calkins, Units of Study, Bridges Mathematics, Words Their Way, Math Expressions, Lexia Core 5, anything that I worked with at the school, I wanted to put on there specifically by name. And then, of course, I listed the couple of committees that I was a part of because that's important as well. I then included every job that I had since college because my mom told me that if there's gaps, they question that, and so I even have me working at Petco on my resume. I don't know if that's best practice, but the other position that I had that I really focused on in my resume is that before I was a teacher, I was a residence hall director at a college, so I was supervising resident assistants. I also managed a front desk team, and I worked a lot with crisis response. I was on call. And so I felt like that really applies to teaching. I think that's how I got my first job as the long-term sub, is by having all this experience and then knowing myself really well. But I really focused on that in my resume as well. Anyway, like I said, if you want to know specifics about my resume, I would gladly share it with you. But that's that for resumes. The next step in the process after I updated my resume was updating my profile on Wisconsin's website that helps you find teaching jobs. So I had a lot of stuff in there from when I initially applied for the long-term substitute position. So I went through all of that. I updated all my information. You're going to have to repeat a lot of what's in your resume. But they have these questions in hours in Wisconsin that focus on like who you are and like what are your beliefs as a teacher, like what's your philosophy. And I would just say, if you have anything like that in your state, don't try to put what you think they want you to say. Just be sincere to yourself. Like, what do you know about yourself? What are your actual strengths? What are your actual qualities? And what do you actually believe about students and teaching and how you would go about doing that? And yeah, add in keywords here and there if it actually applies to you. But my biggest advice for that would be just literally be yourself in what you're saying. Don't try to change your beliefs to try to get a job because you're probably going to end up somewhere that doesn't line up with who you are. So after I updated all of that, which I did fairly quickly, I just kept an eye out for positions. And I was very, very picky with what I applied to and what I would accept an interview from. I was very picky. The reason that I was able to be so picky is because I already had a job and I liked where I was. And so I didn't really have to worry about applying to everything that I could or checking the website all the time. I just didn't feel a lot of stress or pressure because I was happy where I was at. And like I said before, I had deal breakers for whether I would accept a job or not, but I did have a few other measures for whether I would apply to a job or not. One, I was only applying to 5th grade positions. I didn't want to teach a different grade level. I knew that I liked 5th grade, so I only applied to 5th grade. 2, again, they had to be within 15 to 20 minutes of me. 3, if I didn't like what I found about a school online, I just didn't apply to it. Sometimes I would kind of look at the website or things I saw about the school and just go, I don't really like it. And then I was like, but I should apply for it anyway. But there were some schools that I was like, I don't want to, and I just didn't. Here is the point in my story where I'm going to share on myself a little and about my beliefs. It's not something I talk about a lot, but I do believe in God, and I have a lot of faith in Him guiding me in the right direction. Part of that faith is that, one, I believe He will bring opportunities to me if I am trying to follow His will for my life, if I'm trying to do that actively. I believe He will bring me things that would be the best for me, and I also believe that He will shut things down if it's not for me or where I should be. And so when I'm applying for things, I wanted to be open to something that maybe wasn't appealing to me immediately, and so I had another measure for whether I would apply to a job or not. On the Wisconsin website for teaching positions, you can check the box to have schools reach out to you, even if you don't apply to them. I also had a measure that if any of those schools were to reach out to me twice, then I would apply to them. So the first time they would reach out to me and go, hey, we saw that you're looking for a position. We have all these openings. You should apply. I just took it as a, hey, this is an automatic message looking for all the people looking for positions. But if that school were to reach out to me again, I just took that as a sign. Maybe I'll just apply for it. It doesn't mean that I had to take the job, but I can at least give them that opportunity. I only applied to 5 different teaching positions before I ended up getting a job. Spoiler alert. I applied to 3 positions that were in my district, where I live, which was my ideal situation. There were some schools that were 5 minutes from my house, and I was like, oh, that's amazing. And then I also applied for 2 positions that are actually in the district that I'm going to be going to. Out of those applications, I was offered 2 different interviews. The first one, I received a call from the principal, and we actually did a lot of phone tag. It was the second to last week of school, and we were trying to set up an interview. And this was a school that I had actually not applied to. I started the application, and then when I was reading about the school and realized what school it was, I stopped and I didn't submit it. But she reached out to me a couple weeks later and was like, hey, are you still interested in the 5th grade position? And so I took that as a sign to be like, well, I'll go forward with it, see what happens. So we went back and forth a long time. Finally, she said, here's when the interviews are happening. And it was on a Tuesday morning, the last week of school. And I was like, is this normal? Do schools expect you to take off of work during the last week of school to do an interview? And I told her, I was like, that's not gonna work for me. Is there anything outside of school hours? And I didn't say this, but it's we're out of school in a week. Why can't we do it then? And she tried to find some extra times, but then she ended up saying they were just gonna go with someone who was able to make one of those interviews, and so we never went forward with it, which I was fine with. Again, I didn't even want to apply there in the first place, and she was super nice, nothing against that school, but it was just a weird situation. Then, a couple weeks ago, I received an interview from a different district at a school that I found out is 15 minutes away from where I live, so that's right at the top end of what I was hoping for. What's interesting about this one is that it was a school that I wasn't initially excited about. It was another school that I was on the fence about applying to, but I did it. Then once I got the interview, they were obviously calling my references. People were reaching out to me about it. Through all these conversations, I started hearing really, really, really good things about the school. And then I heard that a person that I knew from my current school actually works there as a 5th grade teacher. And so I was able to reach out to her, and then she was really honest with me about the school, but she had amazing things to say, which meant a lot to me because she came from where I'm at now and she's going to where I'm going. So after all of that, I started to actually feel really excited about this opportunity. At that point in time, I was still like, I don't want to leave. I had already met my students for next year, and it sounded like the worst thing in the world to have to say goodbye to them and not get to have them as students. However, I will say throughout this whole process, I found myself very in the middle. Like, I was very okay with going either way, which I think helped me in my process. So when I first got the interview, I was in that mindset of like, it could really go either way. I'm not super excited about this school. And I was telling my friends that that's great because I actually feel not nervous for the interview at all, because I'm like, I have a job. I don't need this job. It's all good. And I felt really relaxed about it. But then as I started to learn more about it and got more excited about it, I got a lot more nervous about the interview. And so now I'm going to go into how I prepared for the interview and my process for that. This is the same process that I've used for like any interview that I've gone into, not just teaching interviews. One is that I go find as many practice questions as I can, like everywhere. I search for it on Google. I love going to Reddit. So I searched for like teacher interview questions, Reddit, and I would write down all of those. And then I think about myself as a teacher, like who am I as a teacher? And I like to just kind of summarize myself in, 5 bullet points, or, the key things about myself that I think make me stand out as a candidate or make me who I am. And then I also just go through and I brainstorm and make a whole list of just stories from my experience as teacher or before that, things that just stand out in my mind as important in some way. So I have a list now of qualities about myself, and I have a list of all these stories. Then after I have those lists and I've brainstormed, then I start to go through the questions that I wrote down and see, what connects. And I just start pretending I'm in an interview, and I will spend time just like going through every question and just start talking. And I will do this a couple different times because I know the first time that I try it out, like I'm just testing it and I ramble a lot and I'm like, well, that didn't work. But I do it a couple different times for each question because then I start to really figure out what are the key points that I want to focus on as I'm talking about myself in this interview. Because obviously you're not going to know exactly what they're going to ask you, but I feel like if you prepare enough questions in enough categories, then you will be able to hit something that they're going to ask you. And then you will have now kind of like a template in your mind of things you can draw on, answers that you can just adjust in the moment to fit whatever question they're asking you. And now you have all these qualities about yourself and stories that you can pull from. If they do ask you a question that you didn't prepare for at all, you can just kind of sift through those lists that you already prepared and then tailor it to the question. I don't like to actually type out what I want to say in response to questions because I want it to come out of me naturally, and I want like my brain to have an example of what I could say, but when I actually say it in the interview, I want it to sound natural, so I don't want to like script it. I just want like the general ideas there, and I want to have practice sharing the stories that I'm going to say in the answers, but I don't want to script it out. So when I talk about the actual interview, I will actually tell you examples of questions that they asked me if you are also looking for preparation questions and preparing for interviews. The other thing I did to prepare for the interview is I came up with all the questions that I wanted to ask them. It is very cliche, everyone says it, but you are interviewing them just as much as they are interviewing you. And it was really nice too this time around because I have experience as a teacher, and I have experience in a school, only one school, but I now had preferences. I have things that I want to know, and I know what I want to know, if that makes sense. So I made a list of all the things that I wanted to know, and then I narrowed it down to the couple questions that I for sure wanted to know, that I felt like were important for me to know in order to make my decision. The questions I narrowed it down to were, what ELA curriculum do you use? Because I could find online what math curriculum they used, but I couldn't find what ELA curriculum they used. So if you were brainstorming questions to ask, I think it's important to ask, what math curriculum as well if you can't find it. Those questions, though, I would try to find online first before asking them, because if it's easily able to be found online, it might reflect negatively on you. Another question I decided to ask was, how do you report student progress to families? So do you have grades, things like that? Because the current school I was at did not have grades. So I was curious how the school goes about doing that. I asked what the culture is like on the team and then between teams, because that's really important to me. And one thing that I struggle with is, it's like in an interview, they're selling it to you. Like, they are going to say the right thing. And obviously they're not going to be like, yeah, the culture really sucks. But I feel like in how they answer, you can kind of tell if they are BSing you, or if they're being genuine. And so I think it's still important to ask that. And obviously what they focus on in their answer is going to show you what their school values. I had on here, what does the evaluation and observations process look like? But I actually ended up not asking that one in the moment. I wanted to ask about the class sizes, but they ended up introducing the school to me at the very beginning of the interview, and they covered that, so I didn't have to ask it. I had on here, what support for new teachers do you have? But I also ended up not having to ask that either. The other question that I narrowed it down to that I did end up asking was, what professional development opportunities but also expectations do you have for staff? And the final thing I did to prepare for my interview is I researched the school as much as I could. This is, again, advice you hear from everybody who's giving advice about job searching and interviews, but I just took a general look at their website, saw their mission statement, what do they really focus on when they're talking about students. It did really line up with me and what I believe. I looked at like who the principal was and what her message to families was. I looked at just around the website just to get some information about the school, so that if I have to connect myself to the school, then I can connect my values and theirs and talk about why I want to work there. All right, so now we get to the actual interview. I was very nervous, very, very nervous. Like I said earlier that week, I was not nervous, but I became very nervous. I went to the interview early. I tried to get there like half an hour early, and I just like drove around for a while, and then I parked like 10 minutes before the interview, and I just sat there being really nervous. So then I only went in like 5 minutes early. I think it's important to be early and at least on time, but I don't want to be there like excessively early either. So I went in, they had me fill out some forms, I checked in, and then waited around and just was nervous. And then they took me into the interview. There were 4 people in my interview. I learned in that interview that the grade level team is smaller than I'm used to. It's only 2 people. So I would be working with the one other person on that team. And then there was a math person and a literacy person and then the principal. I started the interview pretty confident, but I started to like feel the stress of the interview, and I just felt like I really got those first questions down. I will be completely honest with you that my confidence in the middle there kind of went down because I just felt really stupid with a couple of my answers and their questions, and the interview space is just such a weird dynamic, and it's always nerve-wracking. Then the last few questions, they went pretty well, and then I got to ask my questions, which I will say, if you're in an interview, ask questions. Like, don't just ask one thing and then move on. Like, have things you actually want to know and then ask them, because I feel like that shows them that you actually care and are interested truly in working there if you have legitimate questions. And don't just pick a bunch of random ones just to ask something. Like, ask the things you actually want to know and that you care about. Their answers to my questions made me feel so much better about the school, made me want to work there so much more. They just sounded awesome, and the way that they talked about the school, the way that they talked with me, it just made me feel really good about them. If you want some examples of the questions that they actually asked me, I wrote them all down so I would be prepared in the future if I ever needed them. They did ask me to tell us about yourself, which is always the dreaded question, like, what do you say? But they added in there to, specify about your education. So that was nice because then I got to really focus on my journey to becoming a teacher, which leads to me talking a lot about myself and what I know about myself, which I think is a big strength of mine because I came into teaching in a different way than the traditional path. They asked me about how I would facilitate the transition between home and school. So I got to talk all about my check-ins for the day, saying I love you to my kids at the end of the day, my focus on relationships and their social emotional well-being. They asked about incorporating technology into different subjects. They asked about how would you respond to a parent complaining about the way we do new math versus how they learned it. They asked some things about communication with parents in general. They asked me what I knew about the workshop model for literacy, and then they asked me what I knew about the math learning environment as well. Both of those questions were worded a very specific way that I can't remember, but that's really what they revolved around. They asked, what would your ideal collaboration time look like with teammates? They asked me about how I ensure that IEP goals are being met, but also wanted me to share about what my collaboration with case managers has looked like in the past. They asked a hypothetical question about if there was a group of kids coming into your class that were known for being difficult or tough to work with, how would you start the year with them? They asked about how I use different assessments. They asked a question about what I would want parents or kids to say about me at the end of the year, and then how would I ensure that that happened. They talked about how the school or the classroom is like a family, and so what's your role in that? So those were some of the questions that I could remember from the interview. I tried really hard to rack my brain for all of them. I'm not sure if that's all of them, and those are not specifically the wording that they used, but that's generally what they asked me. So that can give you an idea of some things to prepare if you're looking for example questions. Then I left and said goodbye, and I went into my car and I was like, stupid, you're so stupid. Oh my God, I felt so dumb. And I was just fixated on those couple of questions that I just didn't feel that good about, which this is something that I need to grow my confidence in because I don't like that I felt that way. I would love to be able to be you know what, it's okay, move on. Just how about we focus on all the ones you feel like you did answer really well? How about that? So yeah, I didn't feel awesome, but again, my faith is very strong that if I'm supposed to be somewhere and I'm doing the best that I can, that God will make that happen for me and help me get that opportunity. And if it gets shut down, wherever I'm going to be other than that place is going to be better. He wants what's best for me. He wants me to be excited and jacked up about life. So I have faith in that. And so in those moments, that's what I relied on. At the end of the interview, the principal told me that I should know by the end of the next week. So this happened on a Friday, so I would know by the end of the next week, one way or the other. So it was very nice that they gave me a timeline. Just from the interview slots that were available, I concluded that there were 5 total candidates, and so I was one of 5. I was also the second to last person to interview if the schedule was accurate, and so there was a person after me. So I went home, I talked to my roommate all about it, and then we went out to lunch. And again, I was very fixated on these questions that I'd answered, but I was trying to be positive about it and just move on. And I also came up with my measures for if I was offered the job, what I needed to happen for me to accept it. My main measure was the pay. I needed to make what I was going to make next year. I needed to make $44,000 a year at least, otherwise I was not going to accept the position. So it's always weird after an interview, you're like, man, I want to find out now, but I'm going to have to wait a week. So yeah, I was out to eat and was eating my lunch, and then all of a sudden I got a call, and I looked at my friend and I was like, I'm getting a call from an unknown number in the city that school is in. And I had pizza all over my hands, and he was like, answer it, and I'm like, I can't, I was just gonna let it go to voicemail, honestly. And he's like, go answer it, and I was like, okay, fine. So I'm in the middle of a busy restaurant, and so I go out and I answer it really quick, and it was the school. It was only 2 hours after I had interviewed, and they were offering me the job. And it was very, very exciting, and they asked what I thought, and I was like, well, I would love to hear more about the offer. And they offered me about $50,000, and that was my impossible number. That was the number where I was like, yeah, it would be amazing, but that's impossible. And so this was very obvious to me that this is where I'm supposed to be, and so I accepted. So that brings us to now. People know we have announced it to the school, and I haven't told kids. I don't know if I'm going to like actually tell kids. The only kids that I would be able to tell directly would be summer school kids, and I'm not really sure if I really want to do that, if that's the best option. I am leaving this school and starting at a new school next year. How I feel about it is very mixed emotions. This school that I'm currently at has supported me so well and taught me so much about being a teacher. It's the only school that I've ever been at because I student taught at this school. They hired me on as a long-term sub, and then they hired me on as a full-time teacher. And they have been nothing but appreciative of me and supportive of me, and have given me so many opportunities to grow and learn how to be a teacher, and I will be forever grateful for them. And the kids that I have had at this school have been the best kids, and I am so sad to be leaving because one of the main reasons that I never really wanted to start looking for another job is that I was scared, and I was so sad whenever I thought about how my students wouldn't be able to get a hold of me if they ever wanted something or needed something from me or wanted to say hi. I wanted to be in the district so that they had my school email, that they knew where I was, and it was really terrifying to me to think that that wouldn't be available to them. And I knew that I needed to do what was best for me, so like if I needed to switch schools, then I needed to do that, which is why I obviously ended up starting this process in the first place. That doesn't make it any less hard to be leaving the school that has given me so much, but also the kids that I love so much. And like I said, I met my kids for next year already, and so that's really, really difficult. I was a little bummed that I didn't get a new job before I met those kids and before they knew they were going to be in my class, because all those kids were so excited to be with me. And I have heard that there are kids going into 4th grade and 3rd grade who wanted to be in my class when they got into 5th grade. And there are just so many positives about where I'm at. Like I finally feel comfortable and like I belong at the school. Like I know how things go, I know how things work, I know what's expected of me. I feel confident enough to speak up about things and offer my help in things, and I feel comfortable sharing my thoughts and ideas with my team and my school. And I'm gonna leave and start over somewhere, which is scary, but honestly it's probably best that I do it early on. And so now is a good time for that, and I'll be able to start fresh at a new school, and I'm sure that I will eventually become the same at the new school, and I'm sure my kids next year are going to be amazing, and I am really excited about the new team, and the culture sounds awesome, and the community sounds great, and I'm going to be able to use all the skills that I learned at my current school over there. But yeah, it's very bittersweet. I have been packing up my classroom this past week, and I have some videos in the works for that, but I'm gonna obviously post this one first. Thank you so much for watching this, I think, very long video about my entire journey in this process. I hope that my story helps you in some way, but if you have any specific questions or anything you want me to share more about or more details about, I am more than willing to share with you and help you along your journey if you are going through the same process right now. I am very excited for the future. Please subscribe if you're interested in seeing where this goes in the future and following along with me. Other than that, that's all I got to say, so I will see you next time.